Alright, what's going on, guys? I just want to say thank you so much for all the love and support I've been getting on my Instagram page and on my Spotify. It's really crazy. I didn't expect anyone to respond this well to my music, so thank you so much. Anyways, I've had a lot of people ask me about how to create the kind of stuff that I make because it's not as popular now. A lot of the music I make is inspired by people like Goldie, Ronnie Size, Plastic Man, Aphex Twin, and then I also have a lot of influence from some vaporwave artists like George Clanton, 2814, Spirit, Toyota Corolla is really great, and there's this other Japanese one that I was really inspired by, but I don't know how to say that. Those are my biggest inspirations. If you want to check them out, you can learn a lot by just listening to their stuff, because that's all that I did. But now we're going to talk more about specific resources, plugins, and kits that I use. So as far as where I look for samples, it's always vintage. I'm not really sampling anything new that often. I still do it on occasion, but most times I'm looking for things from the 70s to 90s. So a lot of 90s sample CDs like the Zero G kits are really popular, and then a lot of 80s breakbeat records that you can kind of find on Reddit and YouTube, and these were used by DJs. They were vinyls that just had drums that were looped from different records like Lynn Collins or Amen Brother. They were placed on these records, and you can just look them up on YouTube, sample them yourself. Old synths from the 70s is a big one, and soul records from the 70s is a massive one as well for both melodic and drum stuff. And then for a lot of the vocal and reggae samples, I like to use sound clashes. A big thing with the sound clashes too is that a lot of those places they're playing dub plates, so it's like their original versions of the song made for them. So it does kind of help as far as copyright is concerned too, because those probably aren't copyrighted, and you know, it's a lot harder to find and match those. They also tend to incorporate a lot of these sound clashes, use these like old school video game sound effects and these old school synthesizer and laser stuff. Really great things that are kind of hard to find anywhere else, a little bit lost to time. And then of course, if it was recorded on tape or you're playing a record back, you get all that distortion and saturation that everyone loves. And then yeah, the specific kits I was talking about are the Zero G kits, the Reddit Jungle 1980 to 1999 kit, and Korg Triton one-shot kits. The Korg Triton one-shot kits, when it comes to one-shots of famous synthesizers, I don't like to link specific stuff because of copyright, but if you just look up Korg Triton one-shot pads or one-shot synths or anything of that nature, you're gonna find something. Now for the best free plugins, VST wise, Dext is really great. It's an FM synthesizer based off the DX7, which is real famous. Any Korg emulator, any Korg M1, there's a ton of free ones. Any Korg Triton again as well. We have Vital, which is a great alternative to Serum. It's a multi-oscillator synthesizer with a ton of capability, and it's completely free. Crusher's really great as far as effects go. Essential Vintage is really great for tape stuff. Dub Delay, Tal makes a really great one that I like. Simple Sub is awesome too for just basic sub basses. So you know, it's basically a sine wave. You can add harmonic content, you can change the ADSR, you can change the type of distortion, the width. It's everything you need for that. It's just really simple and it's really quick, and it also isn't that heavy on CPU. MAME is really great for degrading your quality of samples, but this is more of a MP3 digital degradation software, so you're not going to get any kind of analog warmth or any kind of tube warmth or any of that. This is going to be harsh MP3 style distortion. Rare SE is a great Pultec EQ alternative because it's made by Analog Obsession, which is a great Patreon that has a bunch of free alternatives to these amazing onboard gear plugins. And then for the hardware stuff, which unfortunately does cost money, no way to get that unless you fucking steal it. I love to use the SP404SX. I use it in a lot of my videos, and I use it a lot for performance purposes, as well as the plethora of onboard effects that comes with it, which is really just so cool to me. And it's just another tool, and I get a sound out of it that I find I can't exactly replicate with digital plugins. And I imagine that a little bit of that is placebo. Like all the effects on the SP404SX, you could find free VST alternatives to them, but something about the way they sound coming out of the SP404 I just personally love, and I can't get enough of. And then last but not least is the Akai S2000. This was a really popular sampler that came out, I don't even fucking know when, but it's very, very old. And it has a very, very iconic tone and quality to it that was used on a lot of major jungle and old school records. And then for the paid plugin options, Analog Lab, you can't beat. They just have so many great, far more official. almost in the way that Analog Obsession is, where they recreate a bunch of onboard EQs and compressors. They create a lot of famous synthesizers from like the Prophet, like different organs. You have all these famous iconic instruments used across every genre, not just synthesizers. You have a bunch of great stuff. And the pianos, the acoustic piano options in there are amazing. Next up is Expand and Purity, and the reason why I'm kind of putting these in the same grouping is because they have a similar tonality where they're like kind of somewhere like Rompler style instruments. And then you also have like a massive range of acoustic, like you have upright basses, you have choruses, you have strings, you have brasses. Then you do also have options like square basses and synth leads and really, crazy pads and arps and that kind of thing. They were made around the same time, that like late 2000s, early 2010 era. So it's perfect for the jungle, vintagey stuff when all you have to do is run it through some degrading software like MAME or Essentials like I was talking about earlier, and you can get that old school sound with a more new school plugin. But they're so versatile. Like, I've been using these plugins for years. I still find myself every once in a while finding a sound or finding something in it that I didn't really know about before. Now that I've talked about the gear that I've used, we're going to talk about the theory. So when it comes to the theory, I like to keep it very simple in a sense where I just like using good chords. So a lot of 7th chords, 9th chords, and sometimes I'll even just take a 7th or a 9th chord and add random whole steps and half steps within the chord to make something kind of new. I'm sure that it could be called something very specific, but I'll just kind of make up a chord in a sense and use my ear a lot. And then I'll create chord progressions just like how you would any other way, using music theory, using the circle of fifths, understanding the concept of like 5-1 is resolving, and then keeping things in key and switching keys and all that great stuff. Again, I like to keep it mostly simple. So even though I will on very rare occasions, key switch or do these crazy extended chords, but for the most part it's a lot of major and minor 7th and 9th chords. And then call and response is a big one, where I'll have two instruments kind of quote unquote talking to each other, where I'll have one do a riff and then another one will respond with a different riff, and then you can kind of arrange it and take it from there. That's another thing I feel like is really important, is the arrangement of the whole song, because that's a very big portion of it. Even if you use different instruments, you use different patterns, if it's all arranged the same, even if again they are very different ingredients wise, it can start sounding like every song's the same. So when it comes to arranging these, sometimes I like to start out with like a beautiful melodic intro, and then there's a drop. Sometimes I'll do like a DJ style mix where it's like a drum loop is the very first thing you hear, and then it progressively builds up, and then you can arrange it like that. Sometimes I'll just go with anything that's just off the top of my head. If I have a sample I'm working with, I'll sometimes do an intro with a sample, like a vocal chop from an interview that I like or from a movie. There's a whole bunch of things you can do, but when you're changing up the instruments and you're changing up the chords and the arrangement, you can really create a vast amount of variety in your music. And I feel like that's where a lot of people fall short, is they end up making the same song every day. I was even guilty of that for a while, where I'd almost have like a formula I would follow. I feel like it's good to have a spine and like a framework to go off of, but not like a literal, I start with the bass and then go to the chords. Like, I don't think that's very productive. And I think it's important to be like, we're going to work with a sample today and completely switch up the arrangement, even if you are still making the same genre. And then now for mixing, when it comes to mixing, gain staging and leveling are by far the most important thing. The entire mix is determined by how things are balanced. So even though compressors, fancy EQs, even like the Akai S2000 and these SSL plugins, like those are all great and they form your tone, but they will not create a good mix. The mix is based off leveling, correct gain staging. So if I'm recording something like a guitar or piano, making sure it's not clipping on the way in when I'm recording it, making sure there's no distortion. When I master it, I want to make sure that everything's hitting the plugins, the compressors correctly at the right level, getting the tone and sound that I want. So my biggest priority whenever I'm mixing is just getting the right tonal balance and the right balance really is the best word. I don't know, I'm trying to think of another word to use, but that's really the best word. It's just getting everything balanced and sounding well. Don't be scared to take your favorite songs and download them and then look at the spectrogram, look at the actual data and compare your song to it. I think that's important. The amount of times when I was making my early vaporwave stuff, I'd have like a synthwave or some George Clanton song on the background, and I would try and match it in terms of bass and how it felt and the dynamics and how it felt together and all that. For my mastering chain, I like to mix everything into that Buster SE, that SSL compressor alternative I was talking about. I always have that on the master now. It just glues it in a way that I love so much. Once I started doing it, I never wanted to take it off my tracks. I'll use that Pultec EQ, and I'll boost or cut anything accordingly based off how I'm feeling and what I want out of the sound. And then another part of the mastering chain is going to be some kind of saturation if I need it, or some kind of other treatment. Sometimes I'll add fresh air, a very small amount. All of these plugins in general are being used very little. I'm not doing like anything over a couple, like 4 dB gain reduction is like the most I will do on any plugin. Like nothing should be slamming my signal more than that. So like for the SSL compressor, I'll have it set to the glue setting, getting around 4 decibels of compression. That's the most I will do. Same with the OTT, like the multi-band compression. If I'm feeling lazy, I'll use OTT and I'll turn it up to like 2, maybe 4%. So like barely enough for you to hear it at all. You can really only hear it on like a high quality setup, but it does absolutely make a difference, especially when you are at the very end. You know, you come in with, I use Ozone. I was able to get a good deal on it, so Ozone was free for me. And when you're mastering with that, when you start to use the limiter, you'll definitely notice something as small as 4% multi-band compression. And then when I'm limiting, I don't like a lot of gain reduction, as I said earlier with the limiting. Like I will at max of like 4 dB, and that's, you know, very rare. I like just a small peak. And if I'm trying to make a really aggressive loud track, I'll use limiting and clipping at the end. So I'll add a soft clipper at the end and just boost into the soft clipper with an EQ to get some distortion. Again, only like 1 or 2% max, very little on the numbers. I'm not trying to, when you're mastering, my philosophy is that you shouldn't be completely, no one plugin should be like obliterating the signal. There's no EQ that should have some crazy dip in a random frequency. There's no compressor that should be compressing 20 dB of signal. Nothing of that sort. Everything's very subtle. And then when you stack all of those subtle things together, that's when you find yourself with a big change. So that was a whole bunch of information. That is kind of my whole philosophy with how I make this music and then where it came from. I'm going to talk about a few extra things that are with my music that people also ask about a lot. And one of those is, where do I get my images? So DeviantArt, Pinterest, and the Wayback Machine are the 3 resources that I use a lot. And then another one is just Googling based off dates. So whenever you Google something or look it up on YouTube, you can actually set a time where it can look it up. So for example, if I want to look up gaming videos before 2010, I can type that into YouTube and get results from before 2010. Just 90s, it will have the most amount of stuff that's in my style. If you're looking for a decade to focus on and find aesthetics in, it's the 90s. It's definitely the 90s. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I'd love to answer them. Thank you so much for the support, and thanks for watching. See ya.